He is not part of this reservation. Cancel his room.
Deborah, I'm a guest.
You are not a guest. My daughter felt sorry for you and let you tag along. That doesn't make you family.
Grab your bag and find a motel, bro. Something in your tax bracket.
Carla, you're really not gonna say anything?
You manage a front desk at some little hotel, Isaiah. You have nothing. You are nothing. Someone call security. That's what I thought.
Isaiah Whitfield was 38 years old, and until that weekend, he thought he understood exactly where he stood with his wife's family. He was worth more than any of them combined. They just didn't know it. To Deborah, Franklin, and Wesley Ashford, he was nothing more than the hotel manager Carla had settled for. He let them believe it. He always did. That morning, standing in the lobby of the Wintercrest Grand, Deborah told the front desk staff to cancel his room, told them he wasn't on the family reservation, told a hallway full of strangers that Carla had only brought him along out of pity. Wesley filmed it, laughing, telling him to crawl back to whatever roadside motel he came from. Nobody in that lobby knew whose name was on the deed. Not the staff quietly watching him. Not his own wife, standing 3 feet away, saying nothing. And as security walked him out the front doors of the hotel he secretly owned, Isaiah made a decision that would end 4 lives as they knew them. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The Wintercrest Grand sat at the top of a long curved driveway lined with oak trees, their leaves a deep polished green in the late afternoon light. The building itself was pale stone and dark glass, 16 floors rising clean against the sky. 2 doormen in charcoal uniforms stood at the entrance. A fountain ran in the center of the roundabout, quiet and steady, sending a thin mist across the brick. Isaiah Whitfield pulled his truck into the guest lot and killed the engine. He sat for a moment before getting out. The truck was a 7-year-old Ford F-150, dark navy, a small crack running along the bottom corner of the passenger side mirror. He'd been meaning to fix that for 3 months. He hadn't gotten around to it. He wasn't in any hurry. He stepped out, stretched his back, and reached into the cab for his bag. One bag. A black duffel, soft-sided, nothing fancy. He slung it over his shoulder and walked toward the entrance with his hands in the pockets of his dark jeans. The doorman on the left, a young guy, name tag reading Marcus, reached for the handle and pulled it open with a sharp nod. Isaiah gave him a small smile. "Thank you, Marcus." Marcus blinked, just slightly. People didn't usually read his name tag. The lobby smelled like cedar and something faint and floral. Gardenias, maybe, coming from the tall arrangement on the check-in desk. The floors were pale marble, the kind that caught light and held it. Isaiah walked across them slowly, looking at nothing in particular, the way a man does when he already knows every corner of a room. He stopped at the desk and gave his name to the front clerk, a young woman with her hair pulled back tight. "Mr. Whitfield," she said, typing quickly. "Checking in for the Ashford party this weekend?" "That's right." "Room 408, 2 nights." She slid the key card across. "Enjoy your stay, sir." "Thank you," he said. He meant it. The Ashfords had taken over the 4th-floor lounge by the time Isaiah came up. He heard them before he saw them. Deborah's voice carried like a bell struck too hard, clear, bright, and slightly too loud for the room. She was standing near the window, a glass of sparkling water in one hand, wearing a cream blazer over pressed slacks, every piece of her perfectly arranged. She looked at Isaiah the way she always looked at him, a glance, then a slight turning away. Not rude enough to make a scene about, just enough to make the message clear. "Isaiah?" She said his name like it was a small inconvenience. Deborah. He smiled. You look well. She did not return the smile. She turned back to the woman she'd been speaking with. Franklin Ashford crossed the room toward him, hand extended, face assembled into the shape of warmth. Isaiah! Glad you could make it, son. He pumped Isaiah's hand twice. His grip was firm in the way that practiced men make it, deliberate, performed. Long drive? Not bad, Isaiah said. 4 hours. Good day for it. Of course, of course. Franklin nodded, already scanning the room over Isaiah's shoulder for someone more useful to talk to. His eyes settled on a man near the bar, broad-shouldered, expensive jacket, laughing too loud at something. Franklin excused himself within 30 seconds. Wesley found Isaiah near the luggage cart. Hotel manager, reporting for duty, Wesley said, grinning wide, arms out like he was greeting an old joke. He was wearing a polo that was too small across the shoulders and holding a drink that was too dark for 4 in the afternoon. Wesley? Isaiah set a hand on the cart and looked at him evenly. You bring the little toolbox? Maybe you can fix the ice machine while you're here. Wesley laughed and slapped Isaiah's shoulder. I'm just playing, man. You know I respect the grind. Front desk, hospitality, whatever it is you do. Someone's gotta do it. Isaiah looked at him for a moment. Then he smiled, quiet and brief. Someone does, he said, and turned back to the cart. Carla kissed him on the cheek when she saw him, but her lips barely made contact. She was beautiful in the way she'd always been beautiful. Tall, composed, dressed in a wine-colored wrap dress that moved when she walked. She smelled like the perfume he'd given her for their anniversary last spring. You made it, she said. I always make it, he said. She smiled at that, but it didn't reach her eyes. She looked past him toward the window. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She looked down at it. Something shifted in her face, gone too quick to read, like a shadow passing over water. She turned the screen face down. I need to take this, she said. She stepped toward the hallway. He watched her go. It was while helping Deborah move 2 bags to her upgraded suite that Isaiah first saw it. It slipped out from between a travel magazine and a folded itinerary when he lifted the tote from the cart. A white key card with a printed room number on the sleeve. Suite 1104. He picked it up, set it on the stack. He glanced at the room list he'd reviewed that morning. The Ashford family block was floors 3 and 4, 6 rooms total, not the 11th floor. He said nothing. He handed Deborah her tote, told her the minibar had been restocked per her preference, and pulled the cart back down the hallway. Dinner that evening was set in the private dining room off the main lobby. A long table, white linen, low candles, the quiet sound of silverware, and curated conversation. Isaiah sat near the middle. He ate, he listened, he laughed at the right moments, and he watched Carla. She'd been picking at her food for 20 minutes, her phone sitting face down beside her plate. Twice she'd flipped it over to read something beneath the table. Twice she'd set it back without responding. The third time she read the screen, and her hand went still. She folded her napkin, set it beside her plate, stood up slowly, the way people do when they don't want anyone to notice. "Excuse me," she said softly, to no one in particular. She picked up her phone and walked toward the door, smooth, unhurried, heading toward the elevators. Isaiah waited until Carla had crossed the lobby and stepped into the elevator before he moved. He didn't rush. He kept his pace easy, natural, the way a man does when he's just heading back to his room for the night. He watched the floor display above the elevator doors. The number climbed. It stopped at 11. He took the next elevator up. The 11th floor was quiet. The hallway was long, carpeted in deep charcoal, lit by warm sconces spaced evenly along the walls. The doors on either side were heavy wood, polished dark. Isaiah stepped out and stood still for a moment, listening. He heard nothing but the hum of the building. He moved down the hall slowly, staying close to the wall. Suite 1104 was near the far end, on the right. He could see the door from where he stood. It was already open. Not wide. Just a few inches, the way it opens when someone has just arrived and hasn't let it close all the way behind them yet. He stopped about 30 feet back, just inside the shadow between two sconces. The door swung open the rest of the way. The man in the frame was tall, broad in the shoulders, wearing a white dress shirt open at the collar. Dark hair, well-groomed, the kind of face that had been called handsome enough times that it had shaped the way he held himself. He was holding a glass of red wine, and he was smiling. Isaiah had seen that man's name in the lobby guest register that morning. He hadn't thought anything of it at the time. Patrick Voss. Room 1104. Carla stepped into the light, and Patrick reached out with his free hand, placed it along the side of her face, and drew her forward. She went to him without hesitation, without looking back. No pause, no stiffness, nothing that looked like guilt. The door closed behind them with a soft, clean click. Isaiah stood in the hallway for a moment. The sconce nearest him buzzed once, faintly, and went quiet. He turned around and walked back to the elevator. His room was dark when he got back. He didn't turn on the light. He sat on the edge of the bed, still in his jacket, both hands resting flat on his knees. He breathed in through his nose and out through his mouth, slow and measured, the way he'd trained himself to breathe in difficult rooms, in difficult meetings, across difficult tables. His chest was tight. Something behind his sternum had pulled itself into a hard, small knot. He let it sit there. He didn't try to undo it. He had loved Carla for 8 years, married her for 6. He had held her hand in hospital waiting rooms and driven through ice storms to bring her soup when she was sick, and watched her face in the dark when she laughed at something he said. He knew the sound she made when she was really, truly happy, and he had spent years trying to deserve it. He sat with all of that, and then he set it aside. He picked up his phone and called Odessa. She picked up on the second ring. "I was wondering when you'd call," she said. Her voice was low and steady. She'd had a voice like that for as long as he'd known her, the kind that didn't shift regardless of the hour or the news. "You saw her," he said. "I saw her come in earlier today," Odessa said carefully. "I didn't say anything because it wasn't my place to say anything." "I know." He paused. "Suite 1104. Guest name Patrick Voss. I need the full reservation history on that room. Not just this stay. Everything." There was a brief silence on the line. Not hesitation, just the particular kind of quiet Odessa got when she was already thinking 3 steps ahead. "How far back do you want me to go?" "As far as it goes." "I'll have it by morning," she said. "Thank you, Odessa." He set the phone down on the nightstand. Outside his window, the city was a scatter of lights below the dark sky. He could see the edge of the fountain from where he sat, still running, steady and untroubled, sending its thin mist into the night air. He did not sleep much, but when he did not dream. His phone rang at 6:47 in the morning. 8 months, Odessa said without preamble. Her voice was flat and precise. "Patrick Voss has booked Suite 1104 8 times over the past 8 months. Same suite every time. He requests it by name on the reservation. Pays with a personal card, not a company account." She paused. "The booking dates match up exactly with Ashford family gatherings at this property. Every single one. Isaiah said nothing for a moment. Outside, the sky was the pale gray of early morning, just starting to go light at the edges. Every single one, he repeated. Every single one, Odessa said. He nodded slowly, to no one in the room. Thank you, he said. Keep this between us for now. Of course, she said. Always. He set the phone down on the nightstand and sat with the number. 8 months. The lobby of the Wintercrest Grand looked different in the morning. The chandelier overhead caught the early light coming through the tall front windows, throwing small pieces of gold across the marble floor. The fountain near the entrance ran clean and steady. The front desk staff moved with the quiet, practiced ease of people who had been trained well. Isaiah had trained them himself. Not personally, not standing over their shoulders, but through the systems he'd built, the standards he'd written, the culture he'd shaped over 15 years of working in lobbies smaller and quieter than this one. He stood near the far wall with his coffee, watching. The Ashford family had gathered near the center of the lobby, luggage arranged around them like a small fortress. Franklin stood with his hands in his pockets, looking rested, silver hair combed back smooth. Wesley was beside him, already on his phone, already grinning at something on the screen. Carla stood slightly apart from the rest, her overnight bag at her feet, sunglasses pushed up into her hair. She hadn't met Isaiah's eyes once since he'd come downstairs. He hadn't pushed it. He'd handed her a coffee cup in the elevator, and she'd taken it with a small, tight smile. And that was all. He let the silence sit between them like furniture. Deborah was at the center of it all. She wore a cream blazer, and her posture was the posture of a woman who expected rooms to arrange themselves around her. She had a way of surveying a lobby or a dinner table or a parking lot that made it clear she was always taking stock, always measuring. She turned toward the front desk. Isaiah watched her walk over. He couldn't hear her at first. He was too far away. He watched her lean forward slightly, speaking to the young woman at the desk, a staff member named Gina, 2 years in, one of the sharpest people on the floor. He watched Gina's face stay composed, professional, the way it was supposed to. Then Deborah's voice rose, not into a shout, into that particular register some people use when they want to be overheard without appearing to try. What do you mean, his room is under his own name? She tilted her head slightly, like the question confused her. He is not part of this reservation. He was never part of this reservation. The Ashford family has a block of rooms under my husband's name, and this man— She gestured toward Isaiah without looking at him directly, a short, dismissive wave— was not included. Isaiah kept his coffee cup at his side. He didn't move. My daughter took pity on him and let him tag along, Deborah continued, loud enough now that a couple near the concierge desk had turned to look. That doesn't mean we're responsible for his accommodations. I'd like his room canceled and his key deactivated. Please. From across the lobby, Wesley let out a short laugh. He had his phone out now, aimed in Isaiah's direction. Bro, Wesley said, grinning, maybe you can find a vacancy at whatever roadside motel you usually work out of. He looked back at his phone screen, satisfied with himself. Isaiah looked across the lobby toward Odessa. She was standing near the hallway that led to the management offices, clipboard in hand, watching. Her face was still. Her eyes were on him. He gave her one look, small, deliberate, a barely there shake of his head. She held her position, said nothing. Gina, at the front desk, went through the motions with quiet professionalism. She typed something. She nodded once. She slid a small envelope across the desk toward Deborah. Isaiah set his coffee cup down on the side table near him. He picked up his bag. He walked to the front desk, where Gina handed him a brief, apologetic look, the kind that said, "I know," without saying anything at all. He gave her the slightest nod, a thank you and a reassurance at once. Then he walked toward the front doors. He didn't look at Wesley. He didn't look at Franklin, who had gone very still and was studying the floor. He glanced once at Carla. She was looking at her phone. She didn't look up. The morning air outside was cool and damp. The fountain was audible from the entrance, its sound carrying through the glass doors as they slid shut behind him. A valet stood a few feet away, pretending not to notice what had just happened. A family with rolling luggage passed Isaiah on their way inside without giving him a second glance. He stood on the curb of the Wintercrest Grand, his hotel, his property. His name was on the ownership documents locked in a law office 12 blocks from here, and his signature was on every lease, every vendor contract, every employment agreement inside that building. He had just been escorted out of it. His jaw was tight. His hands were steady. He did not let himself feel the humiliation. Not because it wasn't there, it was there, sitting behind his ribs like something burning, but because he knew what happened when a man let that kind of fire move, without direction. It wasted. He stood on the curb and let the feeling pass through him like weather. And when it had, what was left was something quieter and much more dangerous. He pulled out his phone and opened his calendar. He had work to do. Isaiah's truck was old by choice. He could have driven anything. A black SUV with tinted glass, something European with a quiet engine, and leather that smelled like money. But he'd driven the same used F-150 for 6 years because it suited him, because it blended, because the people in his life who needed to see him coming had always seen the truck and stopped looking. He pulled out of the Wintercrest Grand's parking structure and onto the main road, and for a while he just drove. The city moved around him. Traffic lights, coffee shops, people on sidewalks carrying bags and living their regular Saturday mornings. None of them knew what had just happened to him. None of them would have believed it. He let the drive settle him. Then he called Odessa. She picked up on the second ring. "Already had Gina log the incident," she said, skipping hello. "Time-stamped, her account, my account. You want a formal record?" "Yes," Isaiah said, "and I need everything we have on Suite 7114. Reservation history, check-in logs, payment records, all of it compiled and clean. I can have it to you by tonight. Make it this afternoon." A pause. "Done." She didn't ask why. She never did. "One more thing," Isaiah said. He kept his voice even. "I need the security footage for floors 6 and 7. The past 8 months, every instance that suite was occupied. Pull timestamps and hallway angles. Anything showing who came and went." The line was quiet for a moment. Not the quiet of hesitation. Odessa didn't hesitate. It was the quiet of someone who understood the full weight of what they'd just been asked to do. "Isaiah," she said, and it was the only time her voice shifted, just barely. "Are you all right?" He watched the road ahead. A stoplight turned red. "Pull the footage," he said. "I'll have it to you by 2 o'clock." She was better than her word. By 12:30, Isaiah's laptop was open on the kitchen table, and a secure folder from Odessa sat waiting in his inbox. He worked through it methodically, not fast, not frantic. The way he worked through every problem, piece by piece, until the picture was clear. The financial summary came first. 8 reservations, 8 months. Suite 714, each booking paid with the same credit card under Patrick Voss's name. Every single booking fell within a 2-day window of an Ashford family visit to the hotel. The precision of it was almost neat. It had a rhythm to it, like a recurring calendar event, like a routine. The footage came next, timestamps and file names organized by date in a folder labeled simply 714, hallway. Isaiah opened the oldest file first. The footage was clear. Good cameras. He'd upgraded the floor systems 18 months ago. He watched Carla in the hallway outside Suite 713. The date in the corner read 8 months back. She wore a blue dress he recognized from a dinner they'd had together that same weekend. He remembered she'd told him she was tired and was heading upstairs early. He closed the file. He didn't open another one. He didn't need to. He sat back in his chair and looked at the date again. 8 months ago. He let it settle. Then something shifted at the back of his mind, a small tug, a piece connecting to something else. 8 months ago. He knew what that date was. He got up from the kitchen table and went to the small home office off the hallway. Carla's laptop was on the desk where she always left it. He opened it. She hadn't changed her password in 3 years. He'd never had reason to look before. He wasn't proud of it. He looked anyway. Her bookmarks folder had a tab labeled Articles. He opened it. There were 17 saved links. Recipes, a travel blog, a piece on interior design. And near the bottom, a news article. The headline was clean and direct. Whitfield Hospitality Group closes 340mm regional acquisition, expanding footprint to 12 properties. It was 8 months old. He read it once. He'd read the original draft of the press release himself, had signed off on the language, had sat in the conference room when the deal closed. He didn't need to read it again. What he needed to understand was why Carla had saved it. He thought about Patrick Voss, about the suite, about 8 months of monthly visits that started the exact same week this article ran. He thought about what a man like Patrick would need to hear to keep waiting, to keep believing that a woman already married was worth the patience. It's temporary. He's not what you think. Things are about to change. The article wouldn't have been saved out of pride. Carla hadn't mentioned the acquisition to him, hadn't brought it up once. He'd assumed she hadn't seen it, that it had passed her by the way business news usually did. But she'd seen it. She'd saved it. And she'd used it for something that had nothing to do with him. Isaiah closed the laptop. He stood in the quiet office for a moment, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator down the hall. Then he went back to the kitchen, sat down, and waited for his wife to come home. Carla arrived at 6:30. She brought takeout containers and a breezy story about traffic on the bridge. She set the food out on the counter and talked about her mother's plans for the following weekend, and whether they should repaint the hallway. Isaiah ate. He nodded. He asked one question about her drive. She went to bed at 10:15, kissing him once on the cheek, her hand resting briefly on his shoulder. He sat in the kitchen until her light went off. Then he picked up his phone and called his lawyer. "Marcus," he said quietly, when the line picked up, "I need you to open an investigation. The Ashfords, all of them, finances, business dealings, anything connected to a developer named Patrick Voss." He paused. "Be thorough. Don't miss anything." He ended the call. He sat in the dark kitchen of the house he owned and looked at the table in front of him. He didn't feel angry. He didn't feel sad. He felt clear. The week moved slowly. That was by design. Isaiah went to work. He came home. He ate dinner with Carla, asked about her day, watched television beside her on the couch, like none of it had happened. She seemed relieved by his normalcy. He noticed that too, the way her shoulders dropped a little when he smiled at something ordinary, the way she breathed easier when he didn't push. She wanted him predictable. She wanted him easy to manage. He let her have it. Marcus Hale had been Isaiah's attorney for 11 years. He was meticulous, patient, and completely without drama. Three qualities Isaiah valued above almost everything else in a professional relationship. When Marcus called on Wednesday afternoon, his tone was the same flat, measured voice it always was, which meant whatever he'd found, he'd already sorted through and organized before picking up the phone. Isaiah stepped out to the back porch to take the call. "Start with Franklin," Isaiah said. Marcus did. Franklin Ashford had been quietly hemorrhaging money for nearly 2 years. A commercial real estate portfolio that looked solid from the outside had 3 major properties sitting vacant, 2 refinanced, past their real value, and 1 tied up in a contractor dispute that had stalled development entirely. The man's credit lines were stretched thin. A business loan from a regional bank was past its grace period. He owed more than he owned, and the gap was growing. What he'd found to fill it, apparently, was Patrick Voss. "He's been pitching Voss on a land deal," Marcus said. "Mixed-use development, supposed to be a big play. But here's the problem. To make himself look valuable to Voss, Franklin claimed to have an established business relationship with your hotel group, used the Whitfield name directly, implied a joint investment pipeline that doesn't exist." Isaiah was quiet for a moment. "He's selling access to a relationship I never offered." "Correct. He's represented it as active and ongoing. There are at least 2 documented communications where he references your company by name and implies he can bring Voss into future deals." The backyard was still. A bird moved through the oak tree near the fence, settled, disappeared. "What's the exposure?" Isaiah asked. "For him? If someone wanted to call it fraud, they could. It's misrepresentation to induce investment, not complicated." Isaiah didn't say anything to that. He filed it and moved on. "What about Deborah?" Marcus paused, not because he was uncertain, but because he was choosing his words with the careful neutrality he always brought to personal matters. "Your mother-in-law has had multiple private conversations with Carla over the past 6 months. We obtained records through mutual contacts, nothing obtained improperly. The pattern is consistent." He paused again. "She's been encouraging Carla to leave the marriage, framing it as Carla deserving more, specifically more than what she believes you can offer." Isaiah already knew the shape of it, but hearing it spoken plainly, with documentation behind it, was different. He pressed his thumb against the porch railing and kept his face still. "She's been pushing Carla toward Patrick," he said. It wasn't a question. Actively, her position appears to be that Voss represents a better financial future. She's been operating under the assumption that his money is real and yours is— Marcus stopped. "Limited," Isaiah finished. "Yes." He almost wanted to laugh. Deborah Ashford had spent 6 years treating him like a rounding error, and the whole time she'd been steering her daughter toward a man she believed was the real prize, without ever once checking whether the prize was genuine. "Tell me about Voss," Isaiah said. Marcus's voice shifted slightly, the way it did when a detail was worth paying attention to. His flagship development deal, the one he's been building his reputation on for the past 3 years, is significantly more leveraged than he's let on. We had a financial analyst review his public filings against what he's been telling investors privately. The gap is considerable. How considerable? He's been overstating his net worth to investors by a wide margin. The deal isn't fully funded. It's held together by commitments from people who made those commitments based on numbers he inflated. If any one of his lead investors requested a proper audit, the whole structure would start to come apart. Isaiah leaned against the railing. He thought about Patrick Voss standing in a hotel hallway with his wife, thought about the man's easy confidence, thought about how much of that confidence was borrowed. So he built a reputation on a story, Isaiah said. That's one way to put it. He's very good at looking like money. He's less good at actually having it. Isaiah thanked Marcus, told him to keep everything organized and ready, and ended the call. He stood on the porch a while longer. The sun was dropping behind the roofline across the yard. Inside, he could hear Carla moving around in the kitchen, the sound of cabinet doors, water running. He went back inside. He made small talk about dinner. He helped clear the dishes. And later that night, when the house was quiet, he sat at the kitchen table with the complete file in front of him. The affair, Franklin's fraud, Deborah's manipulation, Patrick's hollow finances, and read through it from beginning to end. By the time he closed it, he knew one thing with complete certainty. They all needed to be in the same room. Isaiah chose a Sunday morning to bring it up. Carla was at the kitchen counter, coffee mug in both hands, still in her robe. The light came through the window soft and pale. She looked relaxed, comfortable. She had no idea. He sat down across from her and folded his hands on the table. "I've been thinking about what happened at the hotel," he said. She looked up. Just a flicker, something careful moving behind her eyes before she smoothed it away. "Isaiah, I don't want to fight about it." He kept his voice easy, tired even, like a man who had been carrying something heavy and was ready to put it down. "I just think things have been off with your family for a while, and maybe I haven't tried hard enough." Carla set her mug down slowly. She was watching him the way she always did when she was deciding whether to believe something. "You want to try harder," she said. "I want to fix it." He shrugged. "Or at least make the effort. I thought maybe a dinner. Something at the Wintercress, since that's where—" He let it trail off. Let the pause fill itself. "I just want them to see me differently. Is that so hard to understand?" She was quiet for a moment. He could see the calculation running underneath the surface. She was checking it for traps, turning it over, and finding nothing wrong with it, because she had no idea what was buried underneath. "You do that?" she said. "After what my mother said." "She's your mother, Carla." He looked at her steadily. "I'm not going anywhere." Something passed across her face then, something he didn't want to name. It looked almost like guilt. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll reach out to them." She made the calls that afternoon. Isaiah sat in the next room and heard pieces of it, her voice rising and falling, the particular brightness she used with her mother that she never quite used with him. He didn't need to hear the details. He already knew they'd say yes. And they did. All of them. Deborah, because she liked the idea of walking back into that hotel on her own terms. Franklin, because anywhere Patrick Voss went, Franklin followed these days. Wesley, because he never passed up an opportunity to feel superior. And Patrick, because a man like Patrick Voss didn't pass on a chance to be seen in a good restaurant beside a woman he believed was almost his. They all accepted. "Next Saturday," Carla told Isaiah that evening. 7 o'clock. "Perfect," he said. Marcus Hale's office printed the final documents on Wednesday. Isaiah went through them himself, at his desk at home while Carla was at a friend's house. He went page by page, unhurried, the way he would review any acquisition. The affair documentation first, reservation records, time-stamped security footage pulled under his ownership authority, 8 months of Patrick's suite bookings mapped out in a clean table Odessa had formatted herself. Then Franklin's fraud, the written communications where he'd invoked Isaiah's company name to impress Voss, the implied joint investment pipeline that had never existed, the regional bank loan teetering past its grace period. Then the ownership records, the full portfolio of the Whitfield Group, 12 properties including the Wintercrest Grand, the acquisition history, the financials. Quiet, unambiguous paper that said exactly who Isaiah was and had always been. Last, Patrick's deal. The analyst's report laying out the gap between what Voss had told his investors and what the actual numbers showed. Inflated valuations, misrepresented net worth. A development held together by trust, built on fiction. He stacked it all into a single folder and locked it in his desk. Then he called Odessa. She picked up on the second ring, same as always. "Everything's confirmed," he said. "Saturday at 7. I'll have the private dining room ready." Her voice was calm and even. "Staffed right." "I need you visible from the moment they arrive," he said. "Not at the table, in the room. But when I give you the signal, I need you to address me by title, in front of all of them." A brief pause. Not hesitation, just Odessa making sure she had it exactly right. "Owner and CEO. Full name, full title. Then hand me the ownership folder." "Done." Another pause. "Anything else?" "Make sure the staff on shift that night are people who were working the lobby last weekend." Odessa understood immediately. She didn't say so. She just said, "I'll handle the schedule." That was one of the things he valued most about her. She never needed him to explain twice. He thanked her and ended the call. The week passed the same way the one before it had. Measured, quiet. He went to work. He came home. He let Carla talk about the dinner like it was a peace offering, like it was his olive branch to her family, like the whole thing had been his idea out of love. It had been his idea. The love part was the only thing she had wrong. By Friday night, every document was prepared. Every role was assigned. Every piece was sitting exactly where it needed to be. Isaiah sat in his chair, the house quiet around him, and waited for Saturday. Deborah Ashford spent Saturday afternoon getting dressed like she was going to war. She stood in front of her full-length mirror, turning slowly, inspecting herself the way she inspected everything, for weakness, for flaws, for anything that could be used against her. She chose the navy wrap dress, the pearl earrings Franklin had given her 20 years ago, back when he still had enough money to give good gifts. She looked exactly like what she believed herself to be. Formidable. In control. "This is the last time we sit through one of these dinners pretending that man belongs in our family," she said to the mirror. Franklin was behind her, fussing with his tie. He didn't answer. He rarely did when she spoke that way. It wasn't agreement, exactly. It was the particular silence of a man who had long since stopped arguing and started simply surviving. Deborah smoothed the front of her dress. By the end of tonight, Carla will have said what she needs to say, and that will be the end of it. Franklin nodded at his reflection. His mind was somewhere else entirely. He'd been carrying the number in his head for 3 days. The loan. The grace period that had already stretched past the point of grace. The phone call from Patrick last Tuesday, brief and polished, that had sounded almost like interest, almost like an opening. Tonight, over dinner, he could make it real. He'd spent an hour the night before, rehearsing how to bring it up smoothly, slipping it into the conversation naturally. Just two businessmen talking. Nothing desperate about it. He tightened his tie and told himself he believed that. Across town, Wesley was already in a good mood. He'd gone back and watched the lobby video twice that week. The one he'd filmed on his phone. Isaiah standing on the curb, bags beside him, that careful blankness on his face. Wesley had shown it to 2 friends and laughed both times the same way he'd laughed the first time. Loud and easy, like a man who had just won something. He put on his best jacket and checked himself in the bathroom mirror. "One more time," he said quietly, grinning at himself. One more time, and he's gone for good. He didn't think past that. He never did. Carla stood in the bedroom she shared with Isaiah and could not decide what to wear. She told herself it was because the night mattered. She wanted to look right for it. She moved through the clothes in her closet, with her fingers trailing over fabric, pulling things out and putting them back. The truth was, she had made her decision weeks ago. She just hadn't said it out loud yet. Tonight, she would. She'd let dinner settle, let the room feel comfortable, and then she'd pull Isaiah aside. She'd be gentle. She wasn't cruel. She'd tell him she wanted a divorce, and she'd mean it kindly. She would. And he would be hurt, because he loved her, and she knew that. But he would understand eventually. He always eventually understood. She pulled out a deep burgundy dress. Patrick had once said that color suited her. She put it on. Patrick Voss was already in the hotel bar when the Ashfords arrived. He sat with the particular ease of a man who was used to being the most impressive person in the room. One hand resting on the bar. A glass of something amber in front of him. He was wearing a charcoal suit, no tie, his collar open just enough to look intentional. He glanced toward the lobby entrance when he heard the family's voices, and the corner of his mouth pulled up. He had thought about Isaiah Whitfield once that week. Just once. A passing thought, something like pity, for a man who still believed that showing up was the same as belonging. Patrick had built his entire life on the difference between the two. Isaiah showed up. Patrick belonged. Tonight was simply the formality. He finished his drink and stood. They arrived in pieces and gathered near the entrance of the private dining room, the five of them assembling without fanfare under the warm overhead light of the Wintercrest Grand's lobby. Deborah greeted Patrick with both hands and a smile that was nothing but teeth. Wesley clapped him on the shoulder. Franklin shook his hand a beat too long, already leaning in close, already starting. Carla stood at the edge of the group, her burgundy dress bright under the chandelier, and she smiled at Patrick when their eyes met. Small, private, the kind of smile that carried a whole conversation inside it. None of them looked for Isaiah. A staff member in a crisp white shirt appeared and led them into the private dining room. The table was dressed perfectly, long white cloth, candles already lit, the silverware placed with the precision of a room that had been prepared by someone who knew exactly what this night was for. They took their seats, adjusting chairs, setting down purses, settling in with the easy confidence of people who believed they were sitting down to a dinner they had already won. And then Isaiah walked in. He walked in unhurried. No rushing, no performance. Just a man in a clean charcoal suit, carrying a thin leather folder under one arm, crossing the room like he had all the time in the world. He pulled out his chair and sat down. He set the folder on the table in front of him. "Sorry to keep you waiting," Isaiah said. Nobody answered him. Deborah watched him with the cool, patient look she reserved for people she'd already decided to dismiss. Wesley leaned back in his chair and picked up his water glass. Franklin gave a stiff nod. Patrick looked at him the way a man looks at a door he's about to close, briefly and without much feeling. Carla said, "We just sat down." Isaiah smiled at her. "Good." A server came in and poured water. Small talk started the way small talk always does at dinners like this, carefully, and without saying anything real. Wesley mentioned traffic. Deborah commented on the table setting, her voice carrying just enough appreciation to be condescending about it. Franklin asked about the bread. Isaiah answered when he was spoken to. He asked Franklin about his week. He listened when Deborah talked. He was calm the way still water is calm, completely, and all the way down. Carla barely touched her water glass. She kept her hands in her lap. She looked at Patrick once, just briefly, and found the small, steadying thing she needed in the way he sat. Relaxed, almost bored, like the outcome was already decided. She straightened in her chair. The appetizers arrived. Nobody had really eaten more than a few bites when Carla set down her fork. "Isaiah," she said. Her voice was even. She had practiced it. Everyone at the table went quiet at the same moment, the way people do when they recognize that something real is about to be said. "I want a divorce." She looked at him directly when she said it. She thought that mattered, that looking at him would make it honest, would make it clean. She had expected him to go still, to deflate, to do the quiet, internal crumbling that she had been bracing herself to witness and move past. He didn't. Isaiah looked at her for a moment. Just a moment. His expression didn't break, didn't sharpen, didn't do anything except settle into something that looked almost like recognition. "Okay," he said. One word. Quiet. Final. Carla blinked. "What?" "Okay," he said again. Same tone, same calm, like he was agreeing about where to order dinner. The table went sideways. Deborah's chin lifted, and for the first time all evening something behind her eyes flickered. Not triumph, not quite, but confusion dressed up as triumph. Wesley looked between the two of them like he'd been cheated out of something. Franklin said nothing, which was the same as always, except that his stillness felt different now, tighter. Patrick shifted in his seat and reset his expression into something neutral, something waiting. Carla opened her mouth, closed it again. She had prepared for hurt. She had prepared for pleading, for the long, painful conversation she would have to be strong through. She had not prepared for this, for him to simply agree and sit there like a man who had already moved on from a place before she'd thought to show him the door. She started. The door to the private dining room opened. Odessa Grant walked in. She wore a charcoal blazer and carried herself with the kind of quiet authority that didn't ask for the room's attention, but got it anyway. Behind her, two members of the hotel's senior management staff followed in matching navy uniforms, both carrying small pad folios, both standing straight. Odessa stopped at the head of the table. She did not look at Deborah or Franklin or Wesley or Patrick. She looked at one person. "Mr. Whitfield," she said. Her voice was clear and unhurried. "Everything you requested has been confirmed. The dining staff is on standby, and the documentation your legal team prepared is in order." She paused for exactly one beat, a pause that was not uncertain but deliberate. "On behalf of the Whitfield Hospitality Group and all 12 properties under its portfolio, including the Wintercrest Grand, we're ready when you are, sir." Silence. Not the polite quiet of a dinner table between courses. Something else. The kind of silence that has weight, that presses against the walls. Deborah's lips parted. Wesley's water glass stopped halfway to his mouth and stayed there. Franklin looked at the two staff members, then at Odessa, then, slowly, at Isaiah. And something moved across his face that he couldn't hide fast enough. Something that looked a lot like a man watching the ground shift under his feet. Patrick Voss went very still. He looked at Isaiah the way you look at someone when you've just realized you never actually looked at them before. Carla's hand was flat against the tablecloth. She wasn't moving. Isaiah let the silence sit for a moment. He didn't rush it. He picked up his water glass, took one slow drink, and set it back down. Then he reached for the folder in front of him. He opened it. He looked around the table. Deborah, Franklin, Wesley, Carla, Patrick, one face at a time, unhurried, steady. "It's time you all heard the truth," he said. He didn't open with Carla. He started with the folder. He turned to the first page slowly, the way a man does when he already knows every word on it. He smoothed the edge flat against the table and looked up. He looked at Patrick first, not to speak to him yet, just to look. Patrick held the eye contact for about 2 seconds before he glanced away, resettling his jaw, adjusting the cuff of his sleeve. Then Isaiah turned to Carla. 8 months, he said. His voice was low, not angry, just exact. The first time Patrick booked Suite 1114 was the same week I closed the Meridian acquisition. You remember that week? I flew back early to take you to dinner. He paused. You said you weren't feeling well. Carla didn't move. Her face had gone the color of old ash. Isaiah reached into the folder and slid a single sheet across the table toward her. She didn't pick it up. She didn't need to. The dates were printed in clean black type. A column of them, 8 rows, 1 for each month, each one matching a weekend the Ashford family had visited or gathered nearby. Every month, he said. Same suite, same name on the reservation, same card on file. He let that land. Odessa pulled it the night I found out. That was 3 days ago. The word 3 hit the table like a stone dropped in still water. Deborah made a sound. It wasn't quite a word. I'll get to you in a moment, Isaiah said, without looking at her. He kept his eyes on Carla. I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying it because you sat across from me for 8 months and chose this every single time, and I think the people in this room should understand what that actually looks like written down. Carla's eyes were wet. She pressed her lips together and said nothing. Isaiah nodded once, like she'd confirmed something he already knew, and turned to Franklin. Franklin. Franklin's posture was rigid. He was doing his best impression of a man with nothing to hide, and he was not doing it well. Isaiah pulled out a second document and set it on the table, not sliding it, just setting it down flat, like a tool being placed before use. Your pitch to the Harbor South investors, the one you've been circulating for the past 2 months. He tapped the page once. You listed a business partnership with the Whitfield Hospitality Group as part of your asset profile. You implied I'd co-signed on your development ties. He paused. I have never spoken to a single one of those investors. I've never agreed to any partnership with you. Not one conversation. Not one document. Franklin opened his mouth. That's fraud, Franklin. Isaiah said it the same way he'd said everything else. No heat, no performance. Just the word, placed precisely where it needed to go. My attorney has already documented it. What happens with it from here depends entirely on how the next few minutes go. Franklin closed his mouth. Isaiah turned to Deborah. She was sitting very straight. Her expression had not fully collapsed. She was holding it together through years of practiced composure. But something behind it had given way. Her eyes were too careful now, too watchful. You've been telling Carla for months to leave me, Isaiah said. Not because our marriage was broken, because you found someone you thought had more money. He let the quiet stretch for exactly 1 beat. You thought Patrick was the wealthier man in this equation. He let her sit with that. Deborah. His voice didn't change. I'm worth 20 times what Patrick Voss is worth, and I have been for years. The color that moved across Deborah's face was not embarrassment. It was something deeper and uglier. The specific shame of a person who has gambled everything on a calculation and just been shown how badly they got the math wrong. She said nothing. Isaiah turned to Patrick. Patrick was leaning back now, arms loose, projecting ease the way a man does when ease is the last thing he feels. Your Callaway Street development deal, Isaiah said. The one you've been using to impress investors for the past 14 months. He placed a third document on the table. This one had more pages. Your projected valuations are inflated by 38%. The anchor investor you've been citing to attract secondary backers, the one whose involvement you've implied, validates the whole deal? Isaiah looked at him directly. He doesn't know he's being cited, because he hasn't committed. He told you maybe at a dinner 18 months ago, and you've been building your entire pitch around that ever since. Patrick's jaw tightened. You told Carla I was a man who worked at a hotel, Isaiah said. You told your investors you had backing you didn't have. He closed the folder. Same instinct, different room. Patrick leaned forward. Look, whatever you think you have, I don't think anything, Isaiah said. I have documents. The table went quiet again. All 5 of them, Deborah, Franklin, Wesley, Carla, Patrick, were still. No one looked at anyone else. The only sound was the faint hum of the ventilation system above them, steady and indifferent. Isaiah rested his hands flat on the table. The consequences, he said quietly, are already in motion. Wesley hadn't said a word in 10 minutes. That was its own kind of answer. The man who had filmed Isaiah on the curb, laughing into his phone, calling him a charity case, that man was now sitting with both hands in his lap, like a kid waiting outside the principal's office. Isaiah glanced at him once. Wesley! Wesley looked up fast, defensive already. I'm not going to embarrass you the way you embarrassed me. Isaiah said it plainly. But I want you to understand something before I finish. He paused. Every property in my portfolio, every hotel, every extended stay, every boutique inn from here to the coast, you are no longer welcome at any of them. Not as a guest, not as a visitor, not to meet someone in the lobby for coffee. He looked at Deborah. That goes for you as well. Deborah's mouth opened. Effective tonight, Isaiah said. She closed it. He reached into the folder one more time and produced a single-page document. Clean, formal, 2 signatures at the bottom, his and his attorney's, dated that morning. This is already filed with my property management team, he said, sliding it toward the center of the table so both of them could see it. Every front desk manager across every location received it this afternoon. Wesley made a sound that was almost a laugh. Almost. It died before it finished. Isaiah set down the folder and turned to Franklin. Franklin had not moved since his name was last spoken. He was sitting the way a man sits when he's been holding his breath for too long. Franklin. Isaiah folded his hands. 3 years ago, your company took out a small business loan to keep your Harbor East properties from going under. $42,000, 11% interest. He let the number settle. That loan is currently held by Bridgeline Capital Management. Franklin nodded slowly. He knew the name. I acquired Bridgeline 14 months ago, Isaiah said. The color drained from Franklin's face so fast it was almost hard to watch. That loan has been in technical default for 6 weeks, Isaiah continued. We haven't called it yet. I've been sitting on it. He picked up his water glass, took one calm sip, and set it back down. As of tomorrow morning, we are. Franklin's hands, resting on the table, began to tremble. Just slightly. Just enough to see. That will trigger the cross-default clause in your primary line of credit, Isaiah said, which will accelerate the repayment schedule on your remaining Harbor East holdings. I think you already know what that means. Franklin knew. He'd probably known something like this was coming from the moment Odessa walked through that door. But knowing something is coming and hearing it said out loud in front of your family are 2 very different things. He didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. Isaiah turned to Carla. She had been crying quietly for several minutes. Not loudly. She wasn't the kind of woman who cried loudly. But her eyes were red, and her hands were clasped together on the table in front of her, like she was trying to keep herself from coming apart at the seams. A man in a gray suit stepped forward from the wall, quiet, professional, patient, and placed a sealed envelope on the table directly in front of her. She stared at it. "Divorce papers," Isaiah said. "My attorney filed this afternoon." He kept his voice even. "The prenuptial agreement we signed is ironclad. You'll receive exactly what you brought into this marriage, Carla. Nothing more." He looked at her steadily. That was always the deal. She pressed her fingers to her mouth and looked away. He let her. Then he picked up his phone. The table watched him do it. No one spoke, no one moved. The only sound was the soft tap of his finger on the screen, and then the low pulse of a call connecting. 2 rings. "Marcus." Isaiah's voice didn't change. "It's Isaiah." "Yes." A brief pause. "I need you to run a full due diligence review on the Callaway Street development deal. Patrick Voss." Another pause. "I'll send the documents tonight. Pay particular attention to the anchor investor documentation and the projected valuations on pages 9 through 14. He listened for a moment. "Appreciate it." He ended the call and set the phone down. He looked at Patrick. Patrick's expression had gone somewhere past anger, past bluster. He looked like a man watching a building he thought was solid begin to sink into the ground. "Marcus Hale," Isaiah said simply. "Your anchor investor. The one you've been telling people is committed to your deal." He left a pause. "He and I have been partners for 11 years. Patrick said nothing. No one said anything. Isaiah stood. He buttoned the front of his jacket, unhurried, and looked around the table one final time. "I hope everyone enjoyed dinner," he said. A year passed the way years do after a man finally stops carrying something he was never meant to carry. Quietly, steadily, with room to breathe. The lobby of the Whitfield Atlanta was bright and warm, filled with the kind of easy noise that good hotels always have. Rolling luggage, soft conversation, the distant sound of a piano. Isaiah walked through the center of it without rushing. Odessa fell into step beside him, a leather portfolio tucked under one arm, her name now printed on the same company letterhead as his. Odessa Grant, managing partner. She looked up at the signage above the entrance doors, his name, in clean brushed brass. "How's it feel?" she asked. Isaiah looked up at it too. "Like it always should have," he said. "I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like."